Okay, everybody, so once again, welcome to the Monday webinar. And this is, for those of you joining us for the first time or so, this is where we look at all the things that I think are going to be interesting and worth watching for the week ahead. And hopefully we have some big long-term setups we can jump into and some money we can make. And this is a super duper exciting time, remember, because now we're looking at, we're right in the first week of May, and this is typically pretty excellent. We can see some pretty big movement here. So we're going to look at all that in just a moment. Once again, as a reminder here, if you would like to see more of what we're doing, you can go to daytradersfx.com, click on the join button right here, and you can get a 5-day free trial to this live trade group, because we have these live sessions actually twice a day. And so there's lots of follow-up, and there's lots of short and long-term trading opportunities that we will discuss throughout the entire week. But this session, this Monday session, is free to all. Everyone's welcome. So remember, we have two memberships here. One is for the trade room and all of the trade calls and everything. You can see that right there. And then the one right below that is just access to the website, where you actually get recordings to these. You can watch the recordings every day of these live sessions. And still see all the trade calls and all the get mobile trade alerts and so on. And that one's a little less expensive, and it's for those that may not have all the time to attend a live trade room. So we have two memberships, and one that's a little more involved and one that's a little less involved. So stop by and have a look. Questions, comments about any of that, just let me know. Okay, as far as news and everything goes this week, we've got, as you can see, a crazy heavy week going on. So this is going to be a whole bunch of stuff. So we've already seen some news coming up. Is audio still good for everyone? Is that Freeman's on his end or on my end? Okay, so audio is good. All right, excellent. So we'll let him log out and log back in. Hopefully that'll work. Okay, so as far as news goes, we've got a ton of stuff this week. This is like a crazy huge week of news, including today. Today's a big day. We've already seen some big U.S. news here. We had the ISM earlier this morning. We have a bank holiday for Japan, and then we have trade balance in a couple of hours coming up for Australia. That's in about 2.5 hours, and then just about 2 hours after that, we have the interest rate announcement and the rate statement. So that's a big deal. Remember, we're typically looking at, Aussie, New Zealand, Euro Aussie, Pound Aussie, Aussie dollar. So this is going to affect quite a few setups potentially. So keep an eye on this news coming out in the next several hours for Australia. And then going into Tuesday, we've got some UK news, some Canadian, a bunch of US news. We've got employment numbers for New Zealand, retail sales for Australia. Tuesday is like this news day. Every 5 minutes there's a major news announcement. And then Wednesday actually, in this room, Rob Booker and I are going to do a joint live session for Yellen's speech. So his premium members and then my premium members, those that already have access to the website or to the chat room, will be able to join us for this on Wednesday morning. So that'll be interesting. We'll see some fun stuff going on there. Rob and I will be co-hosting the live session on Wednesday morning. Again, if you'd like to join that, you can get a free trial at daytradersfx and click on that 5-day free trial. Okay. And then Thursday, we've got more news coming out on Thursday. We have tons of UK news. We have some interest rate news out of the UK. The rate statement, always a big deal. We have Thursday is just going to be massive. And this is probably going to get some of these pound and euro trades started that we have been trying for the last couple of days and weeks that are kind of just bumping around there. So remember, Thursday is going to be huge for that. And then on Friday, good grief, Friday. We have employment numbers for Canada. So as you can see, it's a huge week for news. Sometimes when we have this much news, it's just like we trade from one news announcement to the next. You know, there's a setup that happens, and then we have a couple of hours until things change, and then another setup, and then a couple of hours. So it'll be a great time. This will definitely be a good week to get a trial to the live trading group, because with this much news, there's going to be a lot of activity and a lot of crazy things to be doing. Okay, so a quick little look at what we're looking for in this euro dollar. I'm not necessarily going to talk about our current positions, because we're going to cover that several times coming up in the coming sessions. But I want to talk about what I'm still looking for on euro dollar here. And here's what we've got going on. Euro dollar is in this nice rising wedge right here. So from the lows of 2013 on up, we've kind of continued with this rising wedge. The euro's in an interesting area because as this wedge is kind of narrowing, remember there's resistance at the top of this wedge, and then there's breakout potential at the bottom of the wedge. Now, with all the news coming out this week, a lot of crazy things are going to be happening, so we've got to keep an eye on that. But if we just look at what we have to trade right now, a couple of things that I love to look at, remember, is the fact that this 200 moving average has not been touched in a good little while. And I've talked about this a couple of times because this moving average just kind of continues going and going and going, and it hasn't been touched since all the way back in November of last year. So we're going on several months now. It's about 150 bars. So it's getting to a nice little point where we could start to see some pullback. But if we look at some of the candles we have right here, we have a nice little bullish engulfing, and we had some big price rejection. Look at this candle right here. This thing shot down and then just went right back up. So you can see that the 4-hour chart's having some pretty good difficulty getting below the 200 moving average. It's just kind of bouncing and testing and so on, and it's just not getting below that 200 moving average yet. So that tells us that we could see just a little more upside potential. I've just been watching this little trend line right here, and the market had a nice little bullish engulfing up to that trend line, and then we had some big price rejection as it attempted to go down, and now it's just barely opened above that trend line. So this is probably going to give us a little bit more of upside potential. We could probably at least see 138.65 right here get tested, and possibly beyond. One thing I like to look at on these monthly charts, I don't know where my upper trend line went, but if we look back at something like this, we can see that this monthly chart has kind of been in this huge kind of swinging situation, and here it is coming up to this trend. And the one thing that I would be a little tiny bit curious about is if this big trend line, if the market consolidates too much without starting to drop sooner than later, then we could see some breakouts starting to happen on this monthly chart. Typically, we don't see major breakouts on monthly charts too often, but they do happen. And it is consolidating and bouncing around right here with some nice resistance levels around 139.65. Above 139.65, we could see this euro dollar just continue right on through. So we got to keep an eye on that. We'll definitely have a better idea with the ECB statement, but that's all the way going into Thursday. And so we need to kind of keep an eye on some of these setups right here, and just kind of watch trend lines and see how things play out over the next couple of days in relation to all of this. I still like the euro pulling back a little bit. I think it's due for a little bit of retracement and some move down to the 200 moving average, at least into 136, 135, 13400 area, and ultimately I'm really holding on for 131.50. So I think we're going to see that sooner than later. But on the flip side, we need to keep an eye on market conditions and definitely trade what we see. Now, speaking of months of May and so on, the month of May is a very, very good, typically a very, very good time for movement in the markets. We see big, big swings in May, and this is why I talk so much about the pre-summer movement. And if we talk about what can and typically does happen in the month of May, the euro, usually its worst time of year every year for the last 12 years, I think, has statistically been the weakest during the month of May. So we see the biggest sell-offs usually on the euro pairs, euro in particular, during May. So this is a really weak month, and there is some validity to kind of typical occurrences that seem to happen over and over and over again. On the flip side, on some of these other pairs, the pound does not show those same statistics. The pound does not have as weak of a time in May as the euro does. The Canadian dollar also sees some weakness in May, and so there's interesting things to kind of just keep track of there, and I would recommend that we just kind of watch everything and keep all of that in mind and trade these setups. So right now, remember, we're looking at this little short-term breakout, and we could see this euro dollar pretty easily head up to 139.65, but ultimately we're looking for this to make a move down, especially if it stays below 139.65. We'd love to see the euro sooner than later get down to 136.50 and again into 134.50 and ultimately into 131.50. So that's what I'm looking for on euro dollar. We're going to keep an eye on all of that going into today and tomorrow and the following day and so on. Pound dollar has been kind of interesting. There's a lot of definitely the fundamental side of things, meaning the numbers and the news and so on. The UK has really entered into quite a economic recovery and quite a strong bullish time. So there will be some struggles to see weakness in the pound dollar, but we don't necessarily need to see huge, gigantic movements down on this pair to get some fantastic trades. We can see some small trend lines break and some, and some pretty good levels get tested while still seeing some bullish pound dollar trend. Now, remember, May is a huge time. So speaking of weakness and strength and so on, euro has a tough time in May, and the U.S. dollar typically is the strongest in May. So May is again, historically speaking, May is a very strong month for the U.S. dollar, which again makes the euro an attractive short and the pound an attractive short as well. Now remember, we have a lot of strength in the pound pairs, but we still do have some technical setups that we have to keep an eye on. So pound dollar has just been in this uptrend, this non-stop uptrend since July of last year. It's almost, it's creeping up on an entire year of uptrend. And currencies, the one great thing about them is they just go up and down. That's what they do, and our job is to figure out how far they go up and how far and when and how far they will go down. We're just looking to kind of play the rubber band movement of this up and down activity. And so the pound is definitely on a crazy run, and it has been since July. And it's also very overbought according to the 200 moving average. It's also overextended according to pivot points. There's some very strong statistics on weekly, daily, monthly pivot points that the pound is quite a bit beyond at this point. And so there's a lot of things telling us that this pound dollar is overbought, but there's also a very bullish undertone here still. So what we're going to be looking to do on this pound dollar is just kind of, again, trade what we see. So if we look at these larger time frames, you can see that this double bottom happened in 2013, and then this thing has just been going straight up. But in this straight up movement, it has created quite a nice little rising wedge right here. And again, these rising wedges are just the wider that get more and more and more narrow. And this is kind of wedging into this upper area right here as well of this rising wedge. You can see this nice little trend line right here. We have a high that's about 169.20. And that just kind of puts us in this nice little triangle of the rising wedge in this little ascending trend line right here. So I'm keeping an eye on all these levels. If we get above 169.20, we're probably pretty easily headed into 170 on pound dollar. So above 169.20, we're headed into that 170. We have a pretty nice little candle right here, though. Daily candles are always interesting, and I love to keep an eye on them. We have a nice little shooting star right here, followed by a hanging man. And it's just kind of kind of softened up from there. So those situations right there are telling us that that there's at least a little bit of potential weakness in the works. So I'm watching this trend line. I'm looking to see if this trend line breaks, and if it stays below 169.20 and breaks this trend line, we could see some at least short-term correction and some selling off. Remember, the first part of May is very, very typically a time that we see dollar strength, and you know, even if it's short-lived, and sometimes it is very short-lived, sometimes it's only good for a couple hundred pips, but a couple hundred pips across a lot of pairs can make a lot of money. So as we start to get below, you know, 150 or excuse me, 168, 100 area, and that starts giving way, we can see that this takes us down into the bottom of this rising wedge, which is down 166.75, puts us into some of that good support there. That's about 166.50, 30, 40, 50 area, and from there we could very, very feasibly see a nice little run down into 164.100, which is the 200 moving average, and likewise several missed daily pivot points and a missed weekly pivot point. So if we start to see this thing giving way from 168, 50, 60 area, we could start to see that give down into that 164.100. So it's not a huge move, but that's definitely a start, and that's obviously several hundred pips, so it's not a horrible move. But I could see this thing starting to move down 300 to 400 pips over the next several days, and even over the next week or so. Of course, the pound also has, the UK has their rate statement on Thursday, along with the euro, and there's going to be tons of activity and tons of craziness going on there, and that's going to give us a big hint and a big clue on what we're going to be expecting on this movement down or this break higher. So we're going to keep an eye on 169.20. Move above that will likely take us into 170, 170.50, 170.100. And then below this trend line and below about this 168, 30, 40, 50 area, we start to see possibilities of moves into 166.35, 165.100, 164.100. So it's really going to just depend a lot on all of this here. But the one thing that we can't argue is that no matter what the trend is on the pound dollar, no matter what the underlying numbers say, and I've said this 10 million times, is that technical analysis and fundamental analysis always go hand in hand eventually, and sometimes that eventually doesn't take very long. So when we have really good technical setups, the news and the fundamental numbers tend to line up fairly quickly as well. And so right now our technical setup is telling us the pound dollar is crazy overbought, and it's ready for at least a correction, maybe not a whole entire reversal and new trend, but it's at least ready for a correction, and that correction could be worth several hundred pips. So let's keep an eye on this setup and be ready to start selling this thing down and shorting it towards that 200 moving average, which is down around 164.100. So that's what we're looking for on the pound dollar. But again, we break these highs and we could very easily be headed up into 170 and above 170. So watch that 169.20 level. Okay, I haven't been watching the Aussie dollar too closely the last week or two, but we do have a lot of important Australian news even today, even in the next several hours. We have the RBA statement and all of that, so that's always a big deal. What I'm looking at here basically on the Aussie dollar is the fact that we've had this nice little trend up for a couple of months now. It bottomed out about January, and it's topped out here just a couple of weeks ago. Actually, almost a month ago it topped out, and it's been retracing ever since. Now, there's a couple of interesting things to look at here. One thing that I look at is some fib levels. The fib run from high to low here, it's opened several times below the 23% fib. That 23% fib is right there around 92.70. You can see that we're sitting about 92.78 or so. It's opened below that several times, and typically when that happens, it's very easy to see a move down to the 38% fib once we've cleared the 23, and it definitely has cleared that 23. And now our 38% fib is around 91.50. So we have potentially 100 to 125 or so pips worth of movement down into that 38% fib, which is also a monthly and a daily pivot point down here. So we could see a pretty nice little move down into 91.50 on the Aussie dollar, and that would break us out of this little trend here and possibly start, a head and shoulders pattern or a double top or something like that. Likewise, I'm watching this trend line right here, and I'm just simply watching to see if some of these daily and weekly highs, specifically some highs of last week, which we almost had a double top there, about 93, 10, 15 area. If we start getting above that, then that's probably a clear sign that this Aussie dollar is headed into a double top, maybe up around 94.50, 9500 area. 9500 is still a very good target. We have some missed pivots up there that will be kind of pulling on the market as well. Australia, the Aussie dollar itself, typically has a weak commodity currency. So Australian dollar, Canadian dollar can have pretty rough Mays as well. So I would be a little more inclined to see some of this breakout here and these moves down on this Aussie dollar into 91.50 and very likely even further below. Remember on some of these bigger setups here, this thing's kind of been zigzagging and it's definitely at a high point right here. If we draw some trend lines and so on, we can see that there's a bit of a channel in the works and a pretty nice big channel here. So we could see some bouncing and some moves down into potential double bottoms and so on. So let's just keep an eye on this big channel right here on Aussie dollar. Probably a pretty easy move into 91.50 and beyond, but let's keep an eye on this little short-term trend line and see if we see a break of that and moves above above some of this resistance and so on. So let's keep an eye on that. Pretty nice little setup on the Aussie dollar. Haven't again given it a ton of attention lately, but it's worth mentioning. It's definitely looking pretty good now. Nothing too exciting on dollar CAD. If anyone's looking at dollar CAD, I don't have a ton to say about this pair yet. It's gotten pretty. This is what the Canadian dollar does, and specifically the U.S. dollar versus Canadian dollar. This is just such a typical setup right here, which is months of sideways movement. So we go back here to January. We got into this channel in January. February it bounced around. March it bounced around. April it's bouncing around. May it's kind of just stayed in this area with a maximum high to low of 400 pips, which is pretty good. But the bulk of the movement has kind of happened more in like about a 2 to 250 pip channel over about a 3 to 4 month period. So I'm still looking for the dollar CAD to make its way down into 10800. Beyond that, I don't see anything too terribly crazy, too wild, too exciting about this pair just yet. So I'm looking for some small moves down into 10800. Beyond that, again, I don't have too much future potential setups for this pair at the moment. One thing to mention is, especially with some of these commodity pairs that see a lot of weakness in May, we can oftentimes see some reversals really across the board on everything later into the summer. Something I've seen happen so many times on Eurodollar, when we see big sell-offs on Eurodollar, pound dollar, sometimes the Aussie dollar, but definitely Eurodollar, pound dollar, and some of the other pairs like dollar Swiss franc, New Zealand dollar, and so on. It's pretty common to see big sell-offs on some of those pairs, towards dollar strength. And then we see things kind of bottom out sometimes in July. So July can be a pretty interesting month. Things will bottom out and then they reverse and make huge runs July, August, September, and then to kind of go into the end of the year. So we should have some pretty big pre-summer runs going between now and about the end of June. We should see some dollar strength and some nice movements there. And then going from end of June, early July on through, we can be looking for some reversals and trading back towards dollar weakness. Now, of course, there's going to definitely be some things that depend there, like what the Fed says over the next couple of meetings and so on. But that's kind of the path I'm gonna look to take things. Looking for some dollar strength coming up sooner than later, and then we'll be selling that dollar strength, over the next couple of months. After the next, month or two, through the next couple of months, we'll be selling that strength and buying back into uptrends on euro dollar and pound dollar and so on. Okay, so again, with the Aussie news coming, keep in mind if you have any pairs on Euro Aussie, Pound Aussie, that Aussie news could really bump things out of shape here. So just a quick little look at the Euro Aussie. We still have a fantastic head and shoulders pattern, and we still are below the neckline here. The one thing that we want to be a little bit cautious of is is this little situation here that you can see a little bit better on this 4-hour chart. We've kind of had we've kind of had this double top just below 150. 150 is a pretty important level. We hit 150.20 and it just dropped from there. It dropped all the way down about almost 200 pips pretty quickly, and it's just come all the way back up again, and we've seen rejection just below 150.20, just below a high about 150.16, and then it's come back down again. So this is an important level. If Euro Aussie breaks above, if we see crazy Aussie news and so on, and we see a break above 150.20, which is, you know, almost 70 pips away, there could be some big upside movement to that one as well. So just keep an eye on that 150.20. Otherwise, on the downside movement, I think we could still see some nice moves down as long as Euro Aussie stays below this below these recent highs right here. Stays below that, then I think there's some great selling opportunities. We have some good looking candles here on the daily chart, and we have a big setup still that tells us that Euro Aussie has a lot of room to go down still. Remember that head and shoulders pattern gives us about 800 pips or so of price projection, and that takes us down into this 142, around 14200 area as an overall target. So let's keep an eye on that with Euro Aussie. Just a quick look at CAD Swiss franc. Remember, we are looking at this CAD Swiss franc as an inverted head and shoulders pattern. And that inverted head and shoulders pattern basically gets invalidated if we start getting below this level right here, which is about 79. At this point now, it's about 79.50. So below 79.50, we're looking for double bottoms and even possible continued downtrends if we break 79.50. But I don't think we're going to see huge runs down. I just could see this going down below 79.50. We could see this all the way down to 7800 to 78.50 area. So that head and shoulders pattern gets invalidated. I like entries basically, you know, current market price to get long CAD Swiss franc. But again, if we start to see a lot of weakness on the Canadian dollar, then we don't want to stay in this thing below about 79.50. We want to start looking for opportunities to short this down into the double bottom, and then look for a bounce at that double bottom, and another opportunity to make a stab at some of these missed upper weekly pivot points and 200 moving average. If you want to just trade this very, very traditionally according to head and shoulders patterns, which is totally fine and perfect and okay as well, then getting long above about 81.20-25 area gives you confirmation of this head and shoulders neckline break, and we can see this. There's a pretty easy 200 pip target at the break of that neckline. So that one's pretty good as well. So nice little setup on that CAD Swiss franc. Here's another one, and guys, again, I'm running through some of these because there's so many to mention and talk about, but write your questions in and I will go over them right at the end. So send over any questions and let's talk about any setups that you guys are looking at. Here's another really super interesting one. We've been watching this Aussie New Zealand for a couple of months now, and it's starting to get interesting again. We have this big oversold market condition. The Aussie New Zealand has not touched the 200 moving average in like 17 years or something. It's been a crazy long time. We have a bunch of missed pivots up here. We have a great little double bottom right there. So what I'm looking for here is I'm looking to see if we can get a little bit of a move lower. You can see we're already about 106.90, and we have this big double bottom about 105.30 area. So I'm going to be watching this pretty closely. We're still a little ways off, 150 or so pips, but I'm going to start watching this super closely as we get down into these lows here. And I'm watching for bounces. I'm watching for a big triple bottom. If this breaks, this is going to also be a good opportunity to short this below this 105, 50, 30 area, and it's also going to create a fantastic a fantastic falling wedge, which gives us another opportunity to big reversal. So probably nothing too much on this pair for a couple of days, but I think later on this week we could very, very well see some stuff, and especially with the Aussie news coming, if it comes out very bearish, then we could see this very easily touch that low just in the next several hours. So this one's going to get interesting, and there's going to be some good things in the works on Aussie New Zealand. So let's keep an eye on that. quick little peek at dollar Swiss franc. I'm still watching this little falling wedge right here. We have a missed weekly pivot up at about 95.40. And I'm pretty interested in getting long as close to 8,700 as possible, and we're at about 87.78 as you can see there. So I don't have like a pending order on this, but I'm going to get pretty interesting, or it's going to get pretty interesting about 75 pips lower than current market price. Okay, and then just two more quickly. Euro CAD looks super interesting. This is a trade we've been talking about quite a bit. Euro CAD looks great. We have this fantastic head and shoulders pattern. We see a lot of weakness on Euro, remember, during the month of May. And we also see some weakness on the Canadian dollar. So this might be a little bit of a battle here, but I really like this trade and this setup. You can see that, that we have that head and shoulders pattern. We had a nice breakout. It's pulled back a little bit. We're going to have some good price rejection, little pin bar action right there on that daily chart. 4-hour chart's looking pretty good. That's nice train tracks, and it's breaking this trend line. So far this this Euro CAD's looking pretty interesting. If it can stay below this little double top here, which is about 52.50-ish area, then I think this is a great short as well. You know, if it stays, you know, below this double top's only 50 pips away, there's great potential for this Euro CAD to play out down into about 147.50. So there's a pretty nice 500 or so pips on this kind of a trade as well. So I like this one. Pound CAD. I like the level on the pound CAD. We've had this big consolidation up here, but I'm getting a little skeptical of this one. I'm just kind of sitting on the sidelines on pound CAD for the moment. I'll kind of just watch how it goes. If we make some highs, spike up and make some highs, that could give us a nice rising wedge. It's pretty overbought and it's pretty ready for some pullback. Same thing on this pound CAD. July it hit its lows and it's just been running up since, and it's up about 3,000 pips from July. So it's had a huge run up, just straight up consolidation and then this straight up run. So I would say this pound CAD's very due for some correction, but it's not probably ready just yet. So we're going to keep an eye on this one and see where it goes. I'm not looking at any other pairs for the moment. Anything that you guys want to discuss or questions you have about certain setups, let me know. But for the moment, those are that's kind of the analysis that I'm looking for and some of the setups. So I would love to hear you guys' questions, and I'd love to hear some comments, and I'd love to hear what you guys are looking at. So start sending it over. Let me get this video formatting real quick, and I'll look for your questions.